I won't say much about who I am because most of you know me and I don't have time. So basically, I'm going to make 5 points. I'm going to talk to 5 points in 5 minutes. First, the general context of what I'm talking about is ethics and the empirical. And, I think we could make some, we could have discussion basically about why it is that ethics and the empirical have kind of more and more moved together, both from the sociologists becoming more interested in ethics and the ethical, and bioethics and things like that, and also from the philosophical side, where empirical ethics is now kind of a discipline within philosophy. So within the sort of sociological kind of paradigm of looking at ethics, there tends to be this focus on practice. So sociologists look at practice. And within that, there's also a kind of an idea about who should be doing. There's a sort of hidden in there, normative idea of who should be doing the ethics. And the answer is, not the analyst, really. It's the person who's doing the practices. That's the proper site of ethics. So I'd like to kind of challenge this by trying to employ some of the tools that we have from STS, notably controversy, as understood in the kind of actor network theory sort of idea of what controversy is, as something which alerts us to something interesting that's going on for the actors involved. And I'd like to kind of employ that in proposing a creative ethics. So basically, Amartya Sen, talks about the need to for philosophers to get involved with the empirical, and he talks about the inescapable relevance of actual behaviour. And of course, most people here will not need to be convinced on that. There'll be more. And it'd be more necessary to convince them on the kind of necessity for frameworks and big overarching kind of meta-narratives to deal with ethics. But Sen is actually addressing his comments to people who talk about the ideal of justice and think that perfecting the ideal of justice is what it's about. So that's where that's coming from. And then we shift over to Vicky Singleton when she was asked to kind of address, and she's obviously within the actor network tradition, and she was asked to address a kind of a normative agenda with regard to a specific technology. And somebody asked her, well, what should we do? We've got this technology. What is your research telling us we should do? And she got into this thing of how, no, we definitely should not be telling anyone that they should do something, which is slightly normative in itself. And then we come to this kind of idea that, we as analysts are not about kind of the normative. We should be only talking about practice and looking at the kind of decisions that people are making, and that's where the ethical kind of lies. And Hedgecoe says, the real philosophers, which I think is, clearly aimed at philosophers, the real philosophers are not philosophers, but the people who need to do practices, so the people who actually have to kind of think about what's ethical and then act upon that. And Anne-Marie Moll says something very similar in The Logic of Care. So she focuses on she talks about care practices as being where kind of the, moral, the real moral content is. It's in the practice. It's not about some kind of chin-stroking philosopher coming along and saying, oh, yeah, that's right and that's wrong. No, she's saying that is where the moral is taking place. And I am caricaturing Anne-Marie Moll a bit because she does make some very excellent points in that book about the kind of overstretching of the logic of care, which kind of feeds into a lot of bioethical debates, which is, it's all about, the logic of choice, where she says that, that's a very overstretched discourse, that everything is about patient choice. But what I wonder then is, well, how can we, the analysts, kind of be normative? What can we actually add in terms of saying, well, what should happen? And so for this, I return to everybody's favourite theorist, which is Latour, and basically to say that he talks about controversy as a way of looking at how kind of practices are not settled, how there's discontent, how people are raising issues and saying, look, we're not happy with this, there's something wrong. And I think here the analyst has a foothold in relation to ethics, in relation to the ethics that actually matter or are actually coming out of practices. So people are talking about, this is happening to me and I'm not sure that this should happen. And this is kind of a site of controversy and understood in this way. And it talks about how things could be different. And I think there is where the analyst can come along and say, well, how would I do things differently? What could I add to this? And Marian Fraser says that it's about the could. It's about what we need to be thinking about is how to tug on unrealized potentiality. So that's where we come in and say, well, people are not happy with this. We can actually enter into the debate here and say, well, maybe it should be like this. And we're not the only kind of voice there, but we can be one of the voices there, potentially. So just to finish, really, the basic idea of controversy is that, you don't go in as a kind of the ethicist sort of instinct is to go in and try to solve people's problems. What Latour says about controversy is that we should let these play out and we should follow them. And so this does not allow for kind of settling in a certain way. We must kind of be constantly engaged. And, this also links into Deleuze, another favourite theorist of mine, who says that, the philosopher's job is not to kind of solve problems. It's rather to challenge obvious values, and there should be in that neither certainty nor respite at any point.